start. All right. One.
Progressivism theory in Jamaica. Group members Shamoya Curry, Shataya Douglas, Kirkle Green, and Winston Pinu. We've created a song to the tune of Redemption Song. Don't just sit and copy notes. Let's explore and share our thoughts. Teachers here to guide the way. We learn by doing every day. Progressivism say, learn by doing, hey. Work together, think and play. Progressivism say, learn by doing, hey. We grow a little more each day. Progressivism say, learn by doing. Hey. What do you think progressivism is? Progressivism is an educational theory that advocates for a student centered approach to learning, where the focus is on interests, experiences, and needs of the learner. John Dewey was an influential American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer, best known for his role in developing the theory of progressive education. He believed that education should be grounded in real life experiences and that students learn best through active participation, critical thinking, and problem solving. I will now turn over to Shatoya Douglas.
Major tenets for progressivism: 1. Student-centered learning. 2. Experiential learning. 3. Problem solving and critical thinking. 4. Social responsibilities. And 5. Holistic development. 3 ways in which progressivism theory impacts education in Jamaica. First, you have student-centered learning and active participation. Progressivism emphasizes that education should focus on the learner rather than the teacher. In Jamaica, this has influenced the National Standards Curriculum (NSC), which promotes student-centered approaches. Teachers are encouraged to create learning environments that 1. Allow students to participate in discussions, ask questions, and explore ideas. 2. Use group work, hands-on activities, and projects that build collaboration and practical skills. And 3. Adjust teaching strategies to meet individual learning styles, promoting inclusion and differentiation. Now I'll give you an example of how student-centered learning approach should appear. So for example, in the primary and secondary schools across Jamaica, students often engage in group-based learning and role-play activities that encourage them to learn by doing, reflecting Dewey's idea that education should be based on experiences. I now hand over to Mr. Green, who will continue on the impact of progressivism theory in Jamaica.
Thank you, Miss Douglas, as we picked up on the impact of progressivism theory in our Jamaican context. It emphasizes on critical thinking and problem solving. Progressivism views education as a tool for preparing learners to solve real-life problems. In a Jamaican context, one, we see students are encouraged to think critically, analyze situations, and develop creative solutions. The curriculum supports inquiry-based learning, where students investigate issues and come up with informed conclusions. Subjects such as social studies, science, and civics include problem-solving activities that address national and global issues like crime, climate change, and poverty. And here's an example. Students may be tasked with designing a community development project or conducting research on social challenges affecting their parish, thereby learning to apply knowledge in meaningful context. At this time, I'll now hand over to Mr. Pingy.
Okay, so another impact of progressivism theory in Jamaica involves the integration of social, cultural, and community relevance. Progressivism supports connecting education to students' real-life experiences and cultural backgrounds. In Jamaica, this is reflected in the inclusion of Jamaican culture, heritage, and history in the curriculum. Also, the use of local examples, stories, and language, such as patois in some cases, to make learning more relatable. So students tend to be more involved in cultural events such as Jamaica Day, which is very important to them because it gives them an idea of Jamaica's history, or Jamaica was um, throughout history. Another way that another way that the impact of progressivism is done in Jamaica is where community involvement in education, encouraging students to participate in local events, like I mentioned earlier, like Jamaica Day, or a learning service or national discussions. For example, programs like Heritage Week, Emancipation Day celebrations, and school-based projects on Jamaican national heroes help students connect learning with their identity and community values. Therefore, Heroes Day, Emancipation Day, those are very important to the children's development. All right. So now we look at the strengths of how progressivism theory impacts education in Jamaica. Firstly, progressivism theory encourages active student-centered learning. One major strength of progressivism in Jamaican education is its focus on active student-centered learning. This approach shifts the role of the teacher from a lecturer to a facilitator, allowing students to take ownership of their learning. Through the National Standards Curriculum (NSC) introduced by the Ministry of Education in 2016, Jamaican schools now promote interactive methods such as group work, projects, and discussions that help develop students' communication, collaboration, and critical thinking skills. Secondly, progressivism theory promotes real-world problem-solving and critical thinking. Another strength of progressivism in Jamaica is its emphasis on real-world problem-solving, which prepares students for everyday life and national development. Jamaican classrooms are increasingly using inquiry-based learning and project-based assessment to help students apply knowledge to real issues such as environmental concerns, community development, and social justice. So based on projects that are given to students, projects like a beach cleanup project, those are projects that students can actually look at to see where they're solving a real world problem in terms of collecting plastics that don't break down and can affect marine life, which in turn affects our climate. An example of the strengths of progressivism theory is where students may conduct a may research crime in their communities or the effect of climate change in Jamaica, allowing them to use school knowledge to analyze and respond to actual problems. This aligns with Dewey's idea that education should prepare individuals to function effectively in a democratic society. All right, so let's switch focus now and look at the weaknesses of progressivism theory, because with strengths, we must have weaknesses also. So one of the weaknesses could be a lack of resources and teacher training. A major weakness in applying progressivism in Jamaica is the lack of adequate resources and teacher preparation to support student-centered learning. Progressivist methods like project-based learning, group activities, and individualized instruction require smaller class sizes, access to materials, and well-trained teachers. However, in many Jamaican schools, especially in rural or under-resourced areas, face overcrowding classrooms, limited teaching aids, and understaffing. So in this case, for the rural areas, we might have limited access to materials as opposed to in the urban areas where there are more qualified teachers, larger classrooms, and more materials to go around for the children to be more successful or get better opportunities as opposed to their rural counterparts. All right, another weakness is the fact that the curriculum implementation challenges and assessment pressures. Another weakness is the challenge of aligning progressivist teaching with the traditional exam-focused assessment system in Jamaica. Although the National Standards Curriculum supports progressive approaches, students still face high-stakes standardized tests like PEP and CSEC, which often emphasize memorization and academic performance over creativity and critical thinking. This creates a conflict between progressive teaching methods and traditional assessment goals, causing many teachers to revert to teacher-centered methods to teach to the test. So teachers in turn, they teach students to pass the test rather than to think on their own, because these standardized tests are set up where the children pull on their short-term memory in order for them to be successful in these exams. All right, so I will now play a video that speaks more on progressivism theory.
Progressive education is a pedagogical movement This approach prioritizes the development of the whole child intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. It is based on the belief that education should be directly connected to the experiences of the child. It believes education should allow learning to be an active process where students engage with their environment to solve real-world problems. The concept of progressive education can be traced back to the works of John Dewey, who is often regarded as its founding father. Dewey argued against the passive reception of knowledge, which was typical of the education system in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Instead, he advocated for an educational environment that mimics the real world, where students learn through discovery and direct engagement. Other early contributors include Francis Parker, who emphasized the importance of training teachers to adapt to a child's educational needs, and Margaret Naumburg, who promoted the use of art as a tool for emotional and cognitive development. A quintessential example of progressive education in practice is the Montessori method. Developed by Dr. Maria Montessori, this educational approach is characterized by a prepared learning environment where children are free to choose from a range of activities that are appropriate for their developmental stage. The teacher's role is more of a guide than a traditional instructor, facilitating learning rather than directing it. Another example is the Reggio Emilia approach, originating in Italy, which emphasizes collaborative, project-based learning with a focus on artistic expression and community involvement. The strengths of progressive education are rooted in its focus on engaging the student actively. By integrating various subjects in ways that are meaningful and interconnected, learning becomes more relevant and enjoyable. This approach not only helps in developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills, but also promotes social skills and emotional intelligence by encouraging collaboration and communication among students. Furthermore, by valuing the individual interests and developmental pace of each child, progressive education supports personalized learning, potentially leading to greater student motivation and self-directed learning. Despite these strengths, progressive education faces several criticisms. One major concern is that its less structured approach might not provide the rigorous academic challenge required to master fundamental skills such as mathematics and reading. Critics argue that without a structured curriculum, students might miss essential knowledge, leading to academic gaps. Moreover, the success of progressive education heavily relies on the skill and dedication of the teacher. Inconsistent teaching methods and a lack of standardized assessments can result in uneven educational outcomes across different classrooms and schools. Additionally, because this approach often requires more resources such as smaller class sizes and specialized materials, it can be less accessible, particularly in underfunded public schools, leading to inequities in educational quality and outcomes. If you're a university student, I recommend reading the article I've left in the pinned comment, which could help you with your studies, or writing an essay on this topic. You might also want to check out the videos on screen now that explore related concepts in education. Progressive education is a pedagogy.
All right, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.